A Watcher's Duty by Nim P. Pseudo. Chapter 9. Between his flamboyant attire and the wide berth granted him by the other bugs, Soulmaster was not difficult to spot. He floated down the library's main thoroughfare, glowering imperiously at any that dared to meet his eye. Loreen planted himself in what he predicted to be Soulmaster's path. He snatched a scroll at random from a nearby shelf and tried to affect an air of self-assured disinterest. He had no intention of revealing weakness to an adversary the likes of Soulmaster. As Loreen stared at what appeared to be a treatise on the rejuvenating power of fungal paste, it struck him that he had not always used that word, adversary, to describe Soulmaster. Long ago, longer than Loreen cared to calculate, the Soul Sanctum had been a mere subsidiary of the Spire, beholden to all its regulations. Soulmaster, though he'd gone by a less preposterous name back then, had begun his tenure at the Sanctum as an administrative assistant. Loreen recalled touring the Sanctum's dull metal halls, exchanging wit with the young bug that would one day cause him so much grief. As he looked down at his scroll, not really reading, Loreen became aware of a presence beside him. It loomed like a stalactite, ready to dislodge. With effort, he suppressed the urge to look up. A throat was cleared, followed by a gravid pause. But it elicited nothing from Loreen. Finally, with a protracted sigh came, "Greetings, Watcher." At this, Loreen lifted his head. Before him hung Soulmaster, vestments billowing in non-existent wind, atrophied legs pendulating in open space. "The illustrious Soulmaster," Loreen said. "A pleasant surprise. Welcome to the Spire." Soulmaster's great flapping mouth tightened briefly. "Surprise? My most recent missive warned of my arrival. Was it not received?" Loreen considered the red flare of his fireplace. "Oh, yes, of course. Forgive the lacking reception, but the Spire has been quite occupied of late." Soulmaster scanned the library and settled on a dozing scribe. A half-finished scroll was crumpled under their mask like a frilled pillow. "Indeed," Soulmaster said. "I have not seen a bustle of this scale since my last visit to the resting grounds." Loreen did not react to the jab, instead making a show of returning to his scroll. "So, what brings you here? Have you come for reading material? Pleasantries, perhaps? I have enough time to accommodate an afternoon visit, but little more than that." "As stated in my missive," Soulmaster said, his every word a nail, "I have arrived to inquire about my previous request." A plethora of requests cross the Spire's threshold every day. You must remind me. "The vault! The pale vault, you—" Soulmaster's mouth snapped shut. He exhaled, short and heated. Loreen rolled to the next section of his scroll. "Ah, that one." Soulmaster paused to reclaim his formality. "I await your reply to my humble request of free access to the Pale Vault within this spire. It is of supreme importance. The King's endeavors into the nature of soul could prove the final key to my research." "As stated in my missives," Loreen said. "Access to the Pale Vault is not granted lightly. Few are worthy to behold the King's private thoughts." "But I am on the very cusp of discovery. With that knowledge, I could conceive a cure to the infection." "If such knowledge existed in the Pale Vault, do you not surmise that the King would have already eliminated this plague?" Soulmaster turned his head. "The King has ruled Hallownest for generations. Even he is not beyond the grip of time. In his old age, he must have overlooked a critical detail. You understand how distracted the elderly can become." Venom bubbled low in Loreen's throat. He fought to keep it free from his voice. "Allowing the improbability of our King's imperfection, I must first reserve time to consider your request." "It has been months, Watcher. How much more consideration do you require?" Loreen set his scroll aside with intentional slowness. "I have already made it abundantly clear that I will contact you once my deliberation has concluded. There is no need to expend your valuable time inquiring." Soulmaster stiffened. He inhaled as though readying a bellow, but instead loosed it as a breathy hiss. "None could accuse the Watcher of being impetuous. You are correct that my time is valuable, especially now given this kingdom's encroaching demise. But if you insist, then I have no choice but to wait." Lurien faltered. "I appreciate your understanding, However," Soulmaster said, "because every instant is indeed so precious, I will remain here at the spire until my request is approved. In that way, I may resume my research the very moment it is permitted." Lurien made a noise, a long, toneless hum. "Come again?" "It is the spire's custom to accommodate noble visitors, is it not?" "That is true." "Surely there is ample space for me in this sprawling structure." "In a geometric sense, technically." "Then it is settled," Soulmaster said, bobbing almost merrily. "I will send for my things. I require a sizable, well-ventilated chamber for experimentation. Additionally, I will need a fully appointed bedroom within reasonable distance of your own so that we may more easily converse." As though he were clutching at a greased rope, Lurien felt it all slipping away. "The sanctum is an hour's walk. This is hardly necessary. How much time do you hope to save by lodging here?" "All that I can. An hour could spell the difference between salvation and oblivion. Do not trouble yourself, Watcher. I will suffer this for the kingdom." Despite the blood pounding in his shell, Lurien stopped to consider. Should he refuse? Could he even? Although it was within his power, and by the king did he long to do it, such a slight against Soulmaster would not go unnoticed. Word would spread among the nobles that Lurien had denied the most basic hospitality to one of their own. He had already offended several families by declining to attend a recent string of galas. Any more of that, and his public approval would plummet. Though Lurien cared little for the nobles' opinions, he still required their cooperation in matters of state. Bureaucracy was a double-edged nail, and the nobles could make Lurien's job a waking nightmare if they chose to rally against him. Knowing Soulmaster, he would make every effort to foment that revolt. All this and more raced through Lurien's mind as Soulmaster leered down at him. "Well?" Soulmaster asked. Haltingly, Lurien lifted a claw into the air. "Attendant." Scuttling feet approached from behind. Lurien turned to address them. "Our esteemed guest, Soulmaster, will be residing—" He stopped. Belvedere stood before him, scroll and quill at the ready. "Yes, Watcher?" "Not you," Lurien said. He flicked his wrists as though shooing a vengefly. Belvedere lowered his quill and slinked away without a word. In an instant, another attendant stepped up to occupy his place. Lurien eyed this new attendant. He felt a twinge of remorse for the curse he was about to inflict. "Soulmaster will be residing within the spire for the foreseeable future. Provide him with lodging befitting his station. Do your utmost to fulfill his requests in the coming days. You are to be his prime assistant." To her credit, the attendant did not hesitate, instead granting Soulmaster a lavish bow and gesturing toward the elevator across the library. Soulmaster chuckled. "Watcher, your generosity is without equal. Once my effects are in order, we will speak again soon. I hope to make of our chats a frequent habit." With that, he floated off, head high in triumph. Lurien's back popped as he fell into a hunch. He shook his head, a tiny, unconscious gesture. How had it gone so wrong so quickly? What should he have done? What could he have done? "Who's the funny gas bag?" Lurien jolted. Hornet was standing beside him, an enormous tablet balanced on her head. A tremble of exertion ran through her neck and arms, but she seemed unbothered. Lurien steadied himself, straightened. "That individual is Soulmaster, a noble of significant influence within the city. We will be accommodating him for the time being." Soulmaster drifted through a choked intersection, berating those that impeded his progress, And I thought you were grumpy, Hornet said. Lorraine did not comment. How long is he staying? Hornet continued. As long as I refuse to grant what he desires. Hornet's head cocked, and the tablet slid dangerously. What does he want? To delve a library of your father's making. A place replete with ancient knowledge. The sort that Soulmaster would not hesitate to exploit. But they're just a bunch of dusty scrolls, right? Who cares? They're all over the place. Let him look and then he'll leave. Lorraine considered how best to respond. Do you recall our meeting with the songstress, when you injured me with that feat of soul? Hornet lowered her tablet, resting its edge on the ground as though she were a shielded knight in a pose of contrition. Yes, I'm really sorry. Lorraine waved a claw, absolving her yet again. You wielded a power that you did not understand, and with it came a consequence. Though you have the dignity to regret that misdeed, Soulmaster long ago lost such capacity. Were I to grant him access to the vault, then he might unearth a power exponentially more destructive than yours. Hornet reached up to brush the tassel of the toy nail on her back. It was a tentative gesture, as though she feared she might be cut. But enough of that, Lorraine said quickly. How goes your reading? Oh, it's good. Well, tell me of it. With a grunt, Hornet hefted the tablet and flipped it over. Wobbling all the while, she cradled it against her chest and ran a digit over the script. The Lands of Farloom, a Wanderer's Journal, by Elena the Chronicler. Ah, I am familiar with that work, Lorraine said. It paints a glowing portrait of that Silk Song kingdom. I know, Hornet squealed. Isn't it amazing? They have this place called a citadel? I have to see it. Can we visit soon? Briefly, Lorraine envisioned the perils that a journey halfway across the world would entail. No. But why? Hornet implored. For the same reason I deny you free reign of the city. You are a princess. Someone of your station is not meant to be endangered. Hornet muttered something about scaredy flies, but pressed no further. And as we circle the subject of personal safety, Lorraine said, I feel that I must make myself thoroughly understood. Heed me now, child. You are to avoid Soulmaster at all costs. He is not like the songstress. He cannot be appeased with something so simple as a royal audience. If he were to learn your identity, he would... I do not know what he would do, but believe this, it would be utterly despicable. Hornet set her gaze firmly on Soulmaster. Some other poor bug had attracted his ire, and was suffering the verbal lash. You really don't like him, Hornet observed. I suppose I do not. Do you want me to get rid of him? Get rid of? Lorraine balked. Yes, I can make him go away. I've done it plenty of times. Explain yourself. Hornet giggled. Oh, but that would ruin the surprise. It's not as fun if you know how it'll happen. Something in those words struck Lorraine as profoundly ominous. He thought to interrogate the girl further, but something else came to him. Where is the vessel? Hornet pointed. Getting yelled at by Gasbag. Lorraine peered at Soulmaster's current victim. Though a shelf partially obscured them, their horns were quite visible. Slender, white, and perfectly symmetrical. Oh no. Trapped between decorum and haste, Lorraine shuffle-jogged across the library. As he neared, Soulmaster's invectives grew clearer. Well, speak up, you gawking ruffian. Have you any defense for bumbling into the Scholar Supreme? Can you begin to fathom the severity of this transgression? Answer me. The attendant at Soulmaster's side cooed a stream of consolations, but he heard none of them. As always, the vessel met the threats with a dispassionate stare. What is the trouble? Lorraine asked, through a slight pant. This impertinent bug, Soulmaster jabbed a claw in the vessel's face, collided with me and lacks the good sense to plead. On some unknown impulse, the vessel reached out and touched the tip of Soulmaster's claw. There was a faint wind, a warm cream light, as it had been in Marissa's chambers, Lorene felt a whisper of soul in the air, and just as suddenly it was sucked away. Gasping, Soulmaster retracted his claw. He held it up as though examining a wound. Lorene shook his head, distrustful of his failing vision, for the claw looked desiccated, drained of life. Soulmaster fell back, cradling his withered limb.
"What is the meaning of this, Watcher?"
Had he not been beaten to it, Lorene might have asked the very same question. He groped for a lie, but found nothing plausible. He settled for silence. With a snarl of focus, Soulmaster clenched his claw. It crackled like dead moss. Another flurry of soul rose, and his cloak thrashed like a chained maskfly. Slowly, color crept into his shell, beginning at the wrist and ascending to the tips of his digits. From the way he quaked, it must have demanded monumental effort. Once mended, Soulmaster let out a ragged breath. He shot a look at Lurien so deathly that it seemed to imply he was to blame for the injury, not the vessel.
"Explain this!"
Soulmaster shouted. It appears to have been an act of soul, Lurien said. He felt as though he were made of shellwood, a thin board about to topple.
"Of course it was an act of soul. Anyone could have perceived that. Why is this bug capable of advanced soul manipulation? And without any mechanical assistance?"
Lurien let out one wheezing cough.
"I could not say. That is not a field of study in which I have expertise." "Curse the expertise! Who is this bug? They crossed your threshold, stand in your very library. You must know their name. Do they realize it is a crime to assault a noble bug? I could have them imprisoned, or worse still."
"They're my assistant!" came a shrill at Lurien's elbow. Hornet was suddenly beside him again, materialized out of that liminal space she seemed to always occupy. Lurien resisted the insane urge to lift his arms and hide her like an embarrassing portrait.
"Your assistant?"
Soulmaster asked.
"And you are?"
"She is," Lurien began. "I'm Princess Flower from Farloom." It required every shred of Lurien's will not to scoff at the lie. He locked his claws behind his back and nodded gently, as she says. Soulmaster shifted his scrutiny away from the vessel.
"Farloom? The land beyond the wastes? What business could be so vital that it demanded a princess make that dire crossing?"
This time Lurien was quicker to the draw. "Education," he blurted. Nothing could be more vital, after all. He loosed a hollow chuckle, then hastened to embellish. "The Spire was recently contacted by the royal court of Farloom, asking that we foster and educate their royal heir for a period of months. It appears the Spire's wealth of knowledge has become something of a legend in the other kingdoms." "Oh, yes," Hornet said, bobbing just a bit too eagerly.
"And the court of Farloom was not dissuaded from this idea by news of the infection?"
Soulmaster asked. Lurien lifted a shoulder. "Despite our gravest warnings, no." Soulmaster hummed and spent a troubling amount of time inspecting Hornet's face. Eventually, he swept into an awkward hovering bow.
"My sincerest greetings to you, Princess Flower of Farloom. I am Soulmaster, Minister of the Soul Sanctum, another institute of great learning in this kingdom. Perhaps you have heard of it?"
"No." Soulmaster tensed, but then chuckled.
"After my work here is concluded, we must remedy that. I will personally provide a tour."
Hornet seemed to weigh the offer. "No thanks." Like a bubble in a pool of magma, Soulmaster swelled, but he did not pop.
"Unfortunate," he said.
At a covert sign from Lurien, the attendant gestured at the elevator and suggested in a honeyed voice that Soulmaster inspect his sleeping accommodations. But he did not even glance at her, instead returning to the vessel.
"Tell me, Princess Flower, is your assistant typical in the kingdom of Farloom? Their mastery of soul would be considered quite exceptional by the metrics of Hallownest."
Hornet tapped her chin. "Mastery? They just started, I think. Is soul stuff hard for the bugs here?"
"Quite hard, yes. I take your reaction to imply that soul manipulation is common among your folk?"
Lurien could feel the deception beginning to totter. With every added question, it grew closer to collapse. He placed a warding claw on Hornet's shoulder, but the girl was oblivious. She laughed, as though having scored a point in a game. Of course, even I can do it.
Impressive, most impressive, Soulmaster said. Could I trouble you for a demonstration?
Lorien's grip tightened. Maybe not today, Hornet said, as though finally realizing her position.
What of your assistant? Soulmaster asked. I would be willing to overlook their earlier offense in exchange for a show of Farloomian soul magic.
They're tired, Hornet said. Soulmaster leaned in toward the vessel.
They do not look it.
He made a curious noise.
Is your assistant native to Farloom? They bear a certain familiar aura.
This had gone on long enough. The scalpel of Soulmaster's inquiry was cutting too deeply. Much longer, and it would draw blood. Lorien needed a distraction, something else to occupy his guest. But what would pique Soulmaster's interest? What did he even care for beyond power and his own aggrandizement? Then it came in a flash. My apologies, Soulmaster, Lorien said, using his most executive tone. But these two must be moving along.
So soon? Soulmaster asked. We have just begun. I have many more questions.
Yes, it is unfortunate, but much more dawdling, and they will be late for rehearsal.
Rehearsal?
Lorien nodded, feigning hesitance. It had been my hope to surprise you, but I have little skill for secrecy. The Spire has been producing a theatrical performance for some time now, one chronicling your personal history. Given our long-standing friendship, he paused to choke back the bile. We thought this an appropriate way to honor you. Soulmaster faltered, so much so that he nearly fell out of the air. After a few clumsy attempts at a reply, he collected himself.
I did not know you were aware of my fondness for theater.
I am the Watcher, am I not?
When will it be complete?
Soulmaster asked. As chance would have it, a matter of days.
I look forward to it,
Soulmaster said. It was the most guileless thing Lorien had ever heard from Soulmaster's mouth. By some sweet mercy of the king, when the attendant repeated her entreaty to Soulmaster, he actually acquiesced. Lorien waved as the attendant guided her dazed charge toward the elevator and out of sight. That was close, Hornet half giggled. Gasbag is so nosy.
Close?
Lorien wheeled on the girl. An egregious understatement if I ever heard one. We skirted catastrophe. Did I not just warn you to avoid him? Spirit needed help. I am aware, Lorien growled, but I could have resolved that situation well enough without you. Okay, fine, I'm sorry, but it's too late now. Indeed it is, Princess Flower. Hornet wiggled her shoulders. A good name, right? It just came to me. Lorien pressed a claw to his mask. He leaned on a shelf and counted down from 10. At 1, he righted himself and set into motion. Come along, children. The girl in the vessel fell into step. Where are we going? Hornet asked. To prepare a play.